Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the April Planning Commission meeting. It's not our regular night. It's not our regular room. So things will be just a little bit different. We have a quorum. We can begin the meeting. The chairman is on the speakerphone, so that's all to the good. For the Planning Commission members, I'm going to participate in making a presentation tonight. So Dan Krasnoff is sitting in as a Planning Commission member designated by Marlene Davis, who I promised her that he'd behave. How many people are here for the Lafayette Square neighborhood plan item? Okay. I'm going to hope that you're all patient people. One of the things that we're worrisome about is losing a quorum given the odd night. And we can do 90% of your item without a quorum, so we're going to move it to last. All right. So with that, Mr. Chairman, you can begin the meeting.
All right. Thank you, Don, and I'm sorry. I apologize for my absence. Could not be in two places at one time. Right now, can we have a roll call from David, please?
Oh, and I'll remind all the members of the commission, mics are very sensitive. Those little offhanded comments that I sometimes make, I'll refrain.
All right, Alderman Boyd?
Present.
Commissioner Bradley? Present. Commissioner Brown?
Present.
Commissioner People?
Present.
Commissioner Krasnoff?
Present.
Commissioner Boaz?
Present.
Commissioner Vines, not present. And Chair Strother?
Present.
Oh.
Okay, so that does give us a quorum at this point. At this time, then, we want to have a review of the minutes and entertain any motions at this time.
Move to approve.
Second.
It's been moved and approved and seconded. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Alderman Boyd?
Aye.
Commissioner Bradley?
Aye.
Commissioner Brown?
Aye.
Commissioner People?
Aye.
Commissioner Krasnoff?
Aye.
Commissioner Boaz?
Aye.
And Chair Strother?
Aye.
And the motion passes with all present voting aye. Motion passes.
Mr. Chairman, we'd like to begin, disrupt our order and begin with item number 6, number 5, which is a zoning item on West Pine Boulevard that Roman will present.
Okay. So item number 6, which is 16-18.
Sorry, you misheard me. Item number 5.
Okay. And Roman's making that presentation. Go ahead.
That's correct. I'll get started. This is a proposed rezoning of one parcel. The address is 4117 Rear West Pine Boulevard. It's a rezoning of single parcel that would be rezoned from the neighborhood general type 1 zone to the neighborhood central type 1 zone. If you're not familiar with those zoning districts, that's because these are not the zoning districts for the underlying zoning district map in the city of St. Louis. This is for an overlay zoning district that was established for the Central West End about 5 years or so ago. I should point out that I'm going to be using the pointer a little bit, and I'm going to be pointing in that direction for the benefit of the Planning Commission members. So for those of you who are over there and can't see that particular slide, that would be good. I know you can see the slide here, but I'll be pointing in that direction, so you might not see what I'm directly pointing to, what I'm saying. So the site is located right there. It's a little over 1/10 of an acre in size. It's located near the northwest corner of Sarah Street and West Pine Boulevard in the Central West End neighborhood. This is a fast-growing part of town, as you're aware. To the east, you have the St. Louis University campus, the proposed city foundry complex, recently built IKEA, the Cortex Innovation District, and the new Metrolink station under construction. The existing use is a vacant lot, and the petitioner would like to consolidate that particular parcel with 3 adjacent parcels. The addresses are listed on the slide, and they'd like to do that in order to construct a $7 million development project that would make way for a 13-unit townhome development project and related parking spaces. The petitioner is 4101 West Pine, LLC. One of the principals of that firm is Austin Rizantny, and I apologize, Austin, if I get your name right. Austin is the president of Row Properties and has developed many properties, particularly in the Southeast neighborhood. This is an aerial photo of the site. The zoning site here is shown in red. As you can see, it doesn't face onto Sarah or West Pine. It faces onto an east-west alley that's located between West Pine and Lindell. And the petitioner would like to consolidate that parcel with these 3 parcels that lie adjacent to it that face onto Sarah Street in order to create a development site for this particular development project. So it would wrap around this adjacent building, the Hampton Condominium Complex, a 16-unit building. Now, let me just give you the lay of land around here. So immediately to the west is a single-family building, and this is where the West Pine Laclede Historic District begins. At that site, and across the street starts at Sarah. Immediately to the north is former headquarters of the St. Louis Housing Authority, which has been converted into a mixed-use complex. Across Sarah are 2 large apartment complexes. Catty-corner to the site is West Pine Lofts, a very, very long apartment complex. 6 north, mixed-use building that was developed about 10 years or so ago. And on the site of this green space here, that's a longer green space. It's currently a construction site, and on it is being developed a mixed-use building by Mr. Barzantny and his partner that consists of 54 condo units and some ground floor commercial uses. To the north is a couple of small commercial buildings and again some single-family buildings. This is a zoning district map for the Central West End Formal District. Again, it was established about 5 years or so ago. The boundaries of the area are basically Lindell on the north, Annavetter on the east, Forest Park on the south, and Kings Highway on the west. And as you can see, there are 8 zones, and they're color coordinated on this particular map. This is a blown-up map of the rezoning site and the vicinity. So the rezoning site here, shown in the black outline, is currently zoned Neighborhood General Type 1, and the 3 adjacent parcels are zoned Neighborhood Center Type 1. One of the regulations under the form-based district is you can't consolidate parcels that have different zoning districts, and that's why the petitioner has requested that the rezoning site be rezoned to the Neighborhood Center Type 1 district, shown in red. So I'd like to quickly show some photographs of both the rezoning site, the development site, and some of the adjacent properties. On the left is the rezoning site. It's a vacant lot, and it's located just beyond that green fence, and between that fence and the condominium building that you see in the background. Looking westward, you get a better look at what the lot looks like. You can see that just beyond this fence here, basically it's green grass and some brush of that nature. So it's an unused piece of ground next to that condominium building. 2 of the 3 adjacent parcels that would be consolidated for the development site are currently being used as a surface parking lot. So the photo on the right here, taken from Sarah, shows you that parking lot is currently being used by construction workers who are working nearby. The last parcel that makes up the development site is a very large vacant lot shown on the left there, and basically bounded by the sidewalk, the adjacent condo building, and a wooden fence along the alley and Sarah Street. And although it's a vacant lot, it's very well maintained, has some grass on it but technically it's a vacant lot. Excuse me. And so collectively, when you combine the rezoning site and those three adjacent parcels, the development site basically consists of the land along this east-west alley and Sarah Street and sort of wraps around that condo building. And then in terms of the adjacent building, we'll start off with the condo building. The frontage along West Pine is shown here in the center. And as you can see, it's a fairly narrow building with most of the units actually facing off to the east. There you can see some of the sidewalks that access the particular units. On the west side of the street, one of the few curb cuts along West Pine Boulevard that serves as a driveway to the underground parking for that condominium structure. Immediately to the west there is a single-family building that, again, this is where the West Pine-Laclede Historic District begins. And the photo on the rear is that same building, but its backyard. So the rear of this particular structure would be immediately adjacent to the rezoning site as well as the development site. An important point to keep in mind is that West Pine is closed at Sarah Street, so there is no through traffic at that point. And as you can see, the photo on the left, West Pine is actually a fairly wide street, but it is closed to vehicular traffic at Sarah Street. The photo on the right basically just showing that from a different direction. Immediately south of that street closure is a partially occupied mixed-use building located on a very narrow parcel. It includes a portion of the Block restaurant, which also is located in an adjacent building, and it also includes a patio that fronts onto Sarah Street as well. And then adjacent to that are two of the structures that face West Pine Boulevard, again, part of that historic district. To the north of the site are two buildings. One on the left is an office building for Places for People. On the right is the former St. Louis Housing Authority building, which has been converted. Immediately on the other side of Sarah Street are these two apartment complexes. Catty corner to the site along Sarah is West Pine Lofts. And some of the members of the Planning Commission from 2 or 3 years or so ago may remember this development project. This is the only site in the form-based district where rezoning has occurred in 5 years of district's tenure. And the reason for that was the developer didn't believe there was enough commercial demand along Sarah Street that would warrant commercial uses to be placed at Sarah Street, and requested a rezoning, which was granted. To the developer's credit, they did put in some administrative offices, as you can see on the photo on the right, and some recreation facilities in the building along Sarah Street to add some foot traffic and make Sarah Street feel a little bit more livelier than if it was just a brick wall. And this last photo is the mixed-use building that's currently under construction at West Pine and Sarah that Mr. Berzotny is developing. Again, it's 54 condo units with ground floor commercial uses, and those commercial uses are, again, required in this particular zone within the Central West End form-based district. Excuse me. So I'd like to go briefly through some visuals that were submitted by the petitioner, and I understand in speaking with Mr. Berzotny, they have some updated visuals that they may want to explain a little bit. Why don't I run through this, and if you want to add some additional information, sure. So this is the site plan that was submitted. As you can see, most of the units here would be facing Sarah Street, with a few of the units facing West Pine Boulevard and the alley. The access, again, would not be along Sarah or West Pine. It would be via this east-west alley and taking advantage of this driveway, which has been coined as the Eco Drive. There would also be a dog park at the far west end of the complex. The street closure would remain in place. I gather that is something that the neighbors insisted on remaining. And also point out that mentions between the proposed building here and the adjacent parcel line for the Hampton condominium is about 8 feet or so, according to that drawing. This is a rendering of the building. As you can see, it's 2 to 3 stories. So this is Sarah Street, this is West Pine, and as you can see, there is no ground floor commercial uses. As part of the development project. In talking with Mr. Barzani, he mentioned that he didn't think there was enough depth along the property along Sarah to warrant having commercial uses be there. Now the zoning district that this would be changed to has that requirement for ground floor commercial uses. So even if the rezoning were to be approved, the petitioner would need to go to the city's Board of Adjustment to request a variance in order to not be forced to put ground floor commercial along Sarah Street. And upon closer scrutiny of the site plan, there may be additional variances that could be required. This is a rendering looking southward of the driveway, and as you can see, there would be underground parking underneath the condominium units. And this is a photo of the west side of the building. And again, there'd be a distance of about 8 feet from the end of this building to the parcel line of the adjacent condominium complex. In terms of the city strategic plan, as you can see, the rezoning site is designated as a neighborhood preservation area shown in that yellow, which calls for infill residential development, so that is certainly in conformity. The adjacent parcels to the east are designated as a special mixed-use area, which calls for a mix of uses. However, we're technically just looking at the rezoning site, and should also point out that with the construction of this project, it would add 13 households to this corridor and help to support some of those existing businesses along Sarah Street. Another thing to keep in mind is that this site will provide a very, very good transition point between the eastern side of Sarah Street, which tends to have larger mixed-use complexes, taller, bulkier, as compared to the west, where you tend to have smaller and residential buildings. So that might make a good transition point. In terms of comments, the proposed rezoning would achieve 3 objectives according to the zoning administrator, including the fact that the development project would provide some additional new housing options. So the zoning is in conformity with the city's land use plan, and staff is recommending approval of the rezoning with the acknowledgement that one or more variances is also required in order to make this development project to go forward. I'd be happy to answer any questions, and Mr. Barzani is here tonight along with his architect from...
Well, all right, thank you, Roman. Why don't we let the architect in and the owner, if they have any comments to make now?
Thanks for having me. My name is Austin Barzani. I'd just like to say that we were able to acquire this additional parcel after we had already acquired the 3 parcels on Sarah, and it was just fitting to be able to include this into our development. Even though, if you look at the site plan, the majority of the parcel is a dog park for our residents, and there's only really about 41 townhomes that sits on this additional parcel. However, to do the 13 townhomes, though, the reason we're here tonight is because we have to have them all zones consolidated together in order to split them into 13 townhomes for later date. So that's the primary reason we're here, asking for the zoning, rezoning of this parcel tonight. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, this is Patrick.
Yeah.
So just so I'm clear, the last parcel is where the current requirement is for first floor retail. Is that, am I understanding that correct?
The primary 3 parcels on Sarah.
Also have that.
Yes.
Okay.
All for first floor. So the one that we're asking to be rezoned now does not.
Got it. Thank you.
And Commissioner Brown, could you serve as my eyes because I can't see if there's other questions at this time.
There appear to be none.
Patrick's holding up his hand and one hand over his heart. Certify that.
Well, with that, any discussions from the board at this time? So, Commissioner?
Move approval.
It's been moved.
Second.
Let's move in a second.
Previous
For
roll.
approval. And call for previous roll. Any objections? Hearing no objections, it's approved with previous roll.
Thank you.
Thank
And Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
we'll move on to item 6.
Okay. And is that Roman also?
It is Roman also.
All right.
Okay, so this is a Chapter 99 lighting study and redevelopment plan for the 3450 Wisconsin Avenue redevelopment area. And the planning commissioners are well aware that this particular item was on the agenda last month and was tabled due to some concerns that were raised by the planning commission. So the resolution that was distributed to you is identical to the one that you received in March, except for the notation that it was, and all PowerPoint though summarizes the basic information.
Just use the one slide.
Just use one slide.
Yeah. So it's an item that we tabled, shown here. Roman can go through it quickly and get to the final slide, but there's 2 things that we'd like you to do. Is one, to vote to take it off the table for consideration tonight, and then second is to deliberate and vote on it. So we need a motion to take it off the table.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion?
We need to do a roll. Previous roll.
I hear a call for previous roll. Any objections? Hearing no previous roll, it has been moved and approved to be taken off the table. Now it's open for deliberations.
So now, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, having seen it before, you're welcome to ask Roman to refresh you and go through it, or we could go into discussion. I think if we went to the last slide, we'd be reminded of this as the basics that are here, the renovation of the school building into apartments, and that staff finds it as being in compliance with the strategic land use plan.
Question. So one of the only difference I noticed in this packet is this one Alderman Gunther has discussed and supported, which we didn't have last month, correct?
Correct. We had a variance of what his support was last month.
And now we clearly know he's in support.
Correct.
Okay. So there were a number of items that were influencing people's thoughts last time. One of them, which was related to another school building, not this one, is no longer a concern to us. And when we vote this out as being in compliance with the strategic land use plan, the Board of Aldermen still has to vote on it.
That's right.
Move approval.
That's been moved. Do I hear a second?
Yep.
Previous roll.
I hear a call for previous roll. Any objections? Hearing none, then we will approve the 1618 with the appropriate amended changes that were presented to us.
That was the easiest presentation I've done. Didn't me.
It's a hard job, but somebody's got to do it, Roman.
Roman's not remembered that our guy was a member of the commission.
With that, Are we moving into the public hearing, Don?
All right. Good evening, everybody. We're going to the main event, which is revision to a neighborhood plan and a public hearing reflecting that. I will point out that next month's meeting, May meeting, Roman will present a new neighborhood plan for adoption. So for a visual aid for the planning commissioners, I'm going to show you, this is the document. We have some copies for you tonight if you'd like to take them. It's available online. You're welcome to start to peruse through that online. Roman will send you a crib sheet out shortly to remind you that in neighborhood planning, there is a whole variety of things that might be interest to the neighborhood that aren't necessarily in our purview. He'll give you some guides as to what to be looking at, and then we'll have a full-blown hearing and a public presentation and public hearing next month. So tonight, we're going to make an amendment to a neighborhood plan that we had adopted. It's the Lafayette Square Plan. Our desire is to get through this public presentation, public hearing, and do a vote tonight. There is the option that we would not do the vote tonight, but we're conducting a public hearing. It's amendment number 2. That's important. It's been amended in the past, and the amendment that occurred in the past was for very much the same geography that we're dealing with. Anybody remember watching the news in June of 2005? Yeah, they were there. Yes. And so this is a neighborhood going up in smoke. Why I show this picture is it's a reminder that in urban places, our neighborhoods are often woven in among other uses. And this was the fire that occurred at Praxair, which made us world famous and made national news, helicopter shots, quite spectacular. And many of the people in the audience tonight live quite close to here, as did one of my staff members, Connie Thomasula, who did most of this work on this, but is otherwise engaged today, came into my door and said, "Don, I'm going home." Why? Oh, Praxair is blowing up. See you. But it's a reminder of that conflict, and you can see from the scale of this that in essence we're having a fresh start in this neighborhood. So I actually think what I'd like to do is just talk for a little bit before I go into this amendment and say that the area we're going to talk about tonight, which is the northwest quadrant where that disaster occurred, has seen a number of proposals over the years for redevelopment. Our amendment number 1 did a major distinction of amending the geography so that Praxair site, which was obviously an industrial use and zoned industrial through our planning amendment number 1, changed it. So it was no longer industrial uses, allowing it to be allowing it to be put into a mixed use state. What we'll show you tonight is this simple amendment number 2 for a pretty large geography. It's going to seem a little complex in the wording, because we've got to remember we're working on a neighborhood plan which is aspiring to be something. So we're not talking necessarily about existing uses, and we're going to talk about our neighborhood plans also laying out what the zoning is. So I think what I'd like to do is have Mr. Odell come up and give the brief presentation that he showed last time of what is the latest embodiment of a housing and mixed-use development that's envisioned for the neighborhood. And if we do that, you'll be refreshed, and you'll see where we're headed and then the relevance of the planning changes. So, Don, if you could come up and cue up that PowerPoint, I would appreciate it.
Thank you. So hopefully this is a refresher for, thank you everybody who saw part of this. We're going to go fairly quickly here, Nick. Go to the next slide, please. This is the site, just to refresh everybody's memory. It's, without the streets included, it's about 11.7 acres. Fronting on Choteau at the corner of Dakota and Jefferson. Within another couple of months, it'll be completely vacant. The truck dealership that's on the corner, Jefferson and Choteau, moved out. Couldn't find a site in St. Louis, unfortunately, and moved to Illinois in 2016. There's a small number of people there. They will be relocating as well, unfortunately. And then that building will be demolished, and the whole site will be demolished. Where the word site is, that's the Praxair, or former Praxair. Next slide. You can read that. I put the amount of time that this land has been vacant, various parcels, but some of them it's been vacant for better than 50 years. Others, the Praxair, have been vacant, 13 years. There have been a number of proposals, as Don has said, that the three of us who come together to buy that and own the majority of land. The one parcel that is named, that's called Blue there, Don, you can point it out, it's owned by a friend Leonard here, which is the former Edge site, and building proposed apartments for that.
I do it the old-fashioned way.
And then the third, the last little blue parcel is the, right below that little sliver, is the former, it's the oldest building in the neighborhood, actually. Oh, okay. That is the oldest building in the neighborhood. It's actually booming right now, and the owner of that is also working with us to redo that building and turn it into a museum of some kind for the neighborhood. The next slide. So, just as a refresher, this is the master plan. It is a mixed use of housing, of townhouses, apartments, condominiums, at a range of price points and pounds, very much from worker housing to probably housing for people who just can't do the three-story buildings in Lafayette Square anymore. Just a few visuals of what that looks like, and the important part of this, and I think we've included a section through the site, as we work through the with the neighborhood, which we've done since September very closely. We've kept trying to keep the scale down so that the parcel on Hickory is 2- and 3-story townhouses, and then you get gradually bigger toward toward Choteau. The highest that we've said is 12 stories in the zoning. Probably not going to get to that height, but the main point of the plan, I think, is to tie it back into the neighborhood. We only have 2 streets, Hickory and Missouri. Hickory 2, actually. Missouri and McKay, both of which are very narrow streets. So one of the very important parts of the development of the plan, working with the neighborhood, was to make sure that none of the traffic generated by this development goes into the neighborhood. So the access points are all from outside of the neighborhood, or outside of the immediate northwest quadrant neighborhood. It's already a problem. Parking is lacking in that existing part of the neighborhood. Next. So just a couple other images of it. Helping, we hope, to redefine Choteau. This is another topic that I've talked about there. Choteau needs a new master plan from the river all the way out this slough. So hopefully maybe this can help spur some of that along. Next. Just another view. We're kind of hovering over Vendusek, if you know where it is, with all the people on that roof today enjoying this weather. Just where we all want to be. Next. This is just a quick section showing the scale of buildings as it changes from 2- and 3-story townhouses at Hickory, and then getting larger potentially as you get to Choteau. you may remember from our last meeting that the site has a substantial drop-off, depending on where it is, 30 to 32 feet. So we're taking advantage of that. And just a quick look, a very quick look. The center of this new development is a new park. It occur at the end of McKay. There's a change in grades, and we'll have a nice stair and ramp there so people can go back and forth. But the pedestrian access back to the neighborhood is very important. A lot of time is spent on the street character, setting the buildings back so that we have adequate street lawns. We've encouraged, I can't remember what we included, we've encouraged parking on the street, but most of the parking for the residents is hidden within the development. Not as asked about the sustainable approach we're going to follow the LEED building system. You know that from something called Bidwell, which is relatively new. This is our hoped for time schedule, timeline. If we get through the city processes, we want to start construction on the first phases. We'll be on Hickory and on Mr. Adamami's property on LaSalle. And the third process will be building the start of the infrastructure on that site. We go along with the demolition of the truck dealership.
So I'll just,
questions. So, when you say that, good.
is that the last slide?
That's the last one.
So I'll just use this to say, we're doing the revision of the neighborhood plan tonight. We're not approving the project per se. It's feeding us into what's going to be the changes. We will see it as a Chapter 99, which will be more focused on this. Don, if you could get me back to the regular presentation, and Bill, while you're still up there, if you'd introduce key people from the neighborhood leadership and from the overall project and area team.
Craig Heller is working with us from Walkworks. I think maybe you know Craig. And actually, let me just have everybody introduce themselves, if that's okay. So, Sue Sessions and another development committee. Well,
Matt Nagry.
Interested neighbor?
Yeah.
And future president. Lisa Smith, current president of the electricity.
And one of our attorneys.
No, talk about it. That would be a little possible. Jody?
Sally?
Sally Brown Foreman, looking for this Chelsea, and we live just up the street.
So with that, thank you, Bill. Let me do the task that we have before us tonight. That's really only about 5 slides. We're in the area of Lafayette Square where this project is, the northwest corner. Amendment number 1 was for that area. And we're proposing some changes. We're proposing really 2 types of changes. The terminology will start to get a little confusing, but it's really pretty basic. 2 types of changes: the changes to the land use map, which is the aspirational map in this area, and recommendations of changes to the zoning. The packet is of yours has these things identified by block numbers. I'll show you the map in a section. There's been, from the first change that we made as amendment number 1, a large area that was identified as mixed use, including the Flax area site. We're now in this rendition tweaking that mixed use designation and calling it changing it from mixed use to special mixed use. That is the primary change in the land use. And then we're going to change one area, subset that we'll see in the map, from mixed use to 5+ family, standard category. So many bullets there, but relatively simple. But that special mixed use creates this new definition for the area that was mixed use. There's a maximum height that will be imposed in that, in a gradation, as Bill showed you, there was the topography difference. And we're going to make a tweak to what's used and allowed under multifamily zoning and the left local business, so that things that are sometimes show up in those places and are used and using that zoning code, such as gas stations, truck dealerships, and industrial uses, are simply not allowed. So the lower right map, again, you can see Lafayette Square Park is the core of the neighborhood. We're up in that northwest corner. The area identified with mixed uses was the change in the amendment number 1. That we're now shading it in the blow-up is those areas are being changed to the special mixed use with those new caveats to special mixed use. And there's one property there where it's being changed from mixed use to 5-family. And that's the property that's just south of LaSalle and also nuzzles up to the oversight. So here is the embodiment of the land use changes. With these changes, these will stick and be in the plan with those really essentially tweaks. This project would merit getting approval through Chapter 99 and other things that we'll see. The companion to that in the neighborhood plan is proposed zoning map changes. There's really one of the basic type where we're changing something that's currently zoned F to C residential. One simple change. Also, as this is where I want to caution you about where the terminology overlaps a little bit. We are going to create, as you saw in Mr. Odell's slides, this is a very mixed-use, dense, lots of open space. Some of the open space is there because the site is challenged because there's very large sewer pipes underneath the crisscrossing the site. So that Shoto area has a certain character that they've worked hard with the neighborhood to produce. And this special use district, i.e. a zoning overlay that would be created, would then put the restrictions on relating to height and uses in this geography, which is essentially repetition. Existing map of zoning is up to the left. The zoom out is where we're making changes, and the changes are embodied in this hatch box showing where this overlay will go, and the shaded area as to where the rezoning would occur to the F, from the F to the C. I'll just remind ourselves, there's a few things before we open up as a public hearing, is that the Lafayette Square neighborhood plan has been around for a while. It was adopted by us in 2001. There was some significant changes going on at Lafayette Square at that time, but they were also interested in looking at aspirational things for Lafayette Square. That's Praxair was in this neighborhood at that time. We moved forward to very much a concern about the Shoto corridor. There were some new condominiums going in. There was that J district, and there were neighborhood meetings. The alderman at the time was quite involved. We moved into a new aldermanic representation, and we adopted the third bullet point of making Amendment 1 at the Planning Commission, which greatly clarified all these issues that's been floating around in this part of the neighborhood for the preference for this mixed use, and creating our authority to rezone the Praxair site on the basis of the plan, what has occurred that allowed a variety of developers then to be interested in the site, but to date they have not borne fruit. The working with the neighborhood, as you've heard, has occurred where there is a synergy between the neighborhood wishes and the refinements in this development. plan. So what I have before you tonight is amendment number 2. It does provide this clearer vision for this area. It's in response to a known development. It recognizes and supports those characters desired by the neighborhood. It brings the neighborhood plan in line with those to be achieved. Proposes some rezoning to be in conformity with the strategic land use plan. We had changed that prior, and we'll recommend approval to this plan. Tonight is a public hearing on the plan. I entertain just a few comments from the planning commission, which need to be, and then we go into the public hearing. Any thoughts, guys, before we do that?
About what you just presented?
No, before we go into the public hearing.
About what you just presented, right?
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure I'm kind of confused. So the 5+ family, and it's red, and then there's another page for a proposed zoning map that goes to C3-4 family, which is like almond color.
So it goes from currently F zoning to C zone.
So currently it's F zoning, 5+ family. That's what it is currently.
No, it's a commercial category. Oh, sorry. It's currently in the land use is mixed, and the zoning is F. But we're going to convert it to being the C3 zone, which is to the 5-family land use, which is the coding for land use in those maps. And then the zoning would go to C.
So there's a difference between the land use map and then the zoning map, and that's what you're saying.
Yeah, that's one.
Yeah, so in the Lafayette Square neighborhood plan, for land use is aspirational. There's a series of categories that we're not used to seeing as those, but specifically one is for 5+. So this particular area where it was zoned for land use was mixed use, it's going to be given the category of 5+ from the standard palette of uses in Lafayette Square, and the zoning map would then be changed to the standard zoning category of C from what it is now, which is F.
Which is 3 to 4 family buildings.
So hold that thought. And Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir. Are we ready for open?
Michelle, does everybody sign?
For public comments, and I'd ask those, as you prepare to give your comments, would you please be sure to state your name, and we are asking that you maintain 2 to 3 minutes on your comments.
Susan, you are not speaking.
Do you have the sign stuff?
Oh, no.
Sorry, I'm already here.
You got the sign.
Well, Suzanne Sessions, I live at 1831 Kennett Place in Lafayette Square. I've lived there 34 years now. And I have been involved with the rezoning and the development of this, we'll call it the Praxair site alone for beginning of that 4 years ago. And I listened to being on the development committee a great deal of animosity and also desire to see this property developed. And I'll say Praxair because that's all we had at that time, just that Praxair site you saw on the plan. Since this has come up and is a chance to develop this entire site with the 3 developers, I've spent myself a year and a half in 14 different meetings with the Lafayette Square Development Committee, with the St. Louis New England Lafayette Square Board, with the general membership. And we have heard and listened to all different requests and what people want to see and what people don't want to see. It's not necessarily this developer, it's what people want to see happen there. And so when it has come now after the end of, these meetings, and we're at a point to discuss this, I'd like to explain why we are urging these two areas of development that to be changed. The one that's covering what I call the Prax Air, Shoto T that's going down into the Prax Air site. So that's the one, and that's this new, what are we calling it now? We're calling it special use, mixed use? Yeah. What's it called for this? Special use? Yeah. But we are asking, and asking because of all the comments that have come from the neighbors during these discussions, to keep the, what I call the high hickory property that we affectionately call Sherwood Forest, as well as this new parcel that's come into the picture, which is the CB 2263, the Edge property, and we asking that they stay or be zoned as C multifamily, 3 or 4 family. The reason being is they are both contiguous to existing historical property. And it has been a real concern. We have the little old stone house on our one property on one side. We have behind it all of hickory, the old buildings of hickory. We have across from it the development that will be you look confused. If we had a map, it would help, I guess.
We'll make your comments on that.
Anyway, but basically, what we're saying is, let's leave those two properties as a buffer from the large development, because they are surrounded by a historical Lafayette Square. Those properties will follow the infill site description that we have and require historic monument examples for any building that they do. The rest of this property, we're talking, is going to be out of the control of the historic monument example, but it will have to follow the look and feeling of the neighborhood and be approved as well. So, is there anything else you would like to hear from me?
I just want a neighborhood voice from the leadership of the neighborhood.
But I want to say this, and I know that it has been a hard time for them, and there's been a great deal of discussion, and I'm sure there are still people who would like to have it done a third way. But we are at a point now when we have a really good way we would like to see it develop. And should the 4 developers all be hit by a truck or trolley, the zoning needs to stay, because that's the important part. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, you have one more speaker signed up.
Yes.
Julianne Stone.
Ms. Julianne Stone? Okay, please go.
Hi, my name is Julianne Stone. I'm an 18 or 19-year resident of 1207 Missouri Avenue. I am about 3 houses up Missouri, up the hill, so that would be south, from the top of the development. So that hickory piece is all proposed to be townhomes. I look at out my front door, okay? First of all, I want to thank Suzanne, because the neighborhood, and there are a lot of people in the neighborhood who have spent countless hours since 2001 doing that original urban plan, and then since Prax Air blew up in 2005, which was when I pretty much got involved, trying to figure out what was right for this. We need to thank these developers, because my big concern, which I discussed with Don over the years, was if just the Prax Air site got developed, were we cutting off our noses to spite our face, because we had these other developable properties around the Prax Air site. One thing was going to get developed that was going to sort of be right in the middle of this area, and all of a sudden that question about how the Shoto corridor we developed as an asset for the city of St. Louis became a problem, because you were sort of doing it piecemeal yet again, which is not good planning, we know. So what's exciting about this proposal for me is not specifically on the table, but that we're looking to change the land use plan and the zoning for, is that they actually have control of all of that acreage and can all of a sudden think of a comprehensive land use for all of Shodo, and we don't get 4 different developers coming in trying to do things that all don't fit together. And I think that cuts off our noses to spite our face in terms of neighborhood goals for this area, as well as in terms of what the city wants to see with potential Metrolink, Southside, Northside coming in eventually, and Shodo going west into Midtown, which I think is a huge issue, and Forest Park Southeast. So something to be considered about why this is important. Second thing, to Suzanne's point, which I don't mean to say it was confusing, but for people, Suzanne, who aren't involved in it every day, I think it is a little bit, which is Lafayette Square is a historic district. And the reason that Suzanne is talking about animosity is there are people who believe that the Metrolink that runs on Shodo should be a historic car. Okay, I mean, so you have to understand that the historic district does officially extend all the way down there, but we've got a problem in that the sort of scope and scale that Shodo requires doesn't exactly fit the model of houses that are around Lafayette Park. And we've had developers come in before this group and say that we should develop houses that look like what is around Lafayette Park on Shodo. Who's buying them? So the fact that this development group is coming in and understanding that there needs to be a tie into the historic character of the neighborhood at what I call the top end, but then we need to start thinking about something that's a little bit different than maybe what's on Park or Lafayette or Mississippi down at Shodo. Needs to be something different. That's hard for a neighborhood that has worked to protect historic preservation for a really long time. So I think that's what Suzanne is talking about when she talks about to the neighbors, the importance of making sure that the top lot that's on Hickory remains townhomes, because that fits into the historic prospect of the neighborhood and still has to be sort of within the historic preservation plan. That's why that's important to a lot of people. I will tell you it's a huge move for this neighborhood to consider anything, even on Shodo, that doesn't look like everything else in the neighborhood. Even though we've got the Mattress Factory and buildings that have that kind of scale and density, it's a change of size, right? So here we've got a developer that's doing 14 acres. I will tell you that we all know that in economic development, the neighbors are not always taken into consideration. We are often an afterthought. And this group, probably because 2 of the partners have been neighbors for a very long time, makes it a difference because they know the character of the community and are committed to it as residents. And so I think they've gone out of their way to start at the beginning and say to the neighbors, what do you want to see here and what are you going to support? Will there be issues as we move forward? I'm sure, but I'm also sure that they're listening. So that's important. Last piece of the puzzle, because I know what you're really here to do today is to not only think about a zoning change, but also to think about an update to the land use plan of our urban plan for Lafayette Square. That plan was done in 2001 initially. It never envisioned that. Cracked air was there. The northwest quadrant was almost not included in the urban plan of that time because there were houses that were all built, there was very little that was developable, and we had an industrial site at the bottom of the hill, and a truck lot, a gas station. So honestly, we were kind of left out of the process because there was not really much that could be done with the character of the neighborhood at our end. Cracked air blew up in 2005. There were a ton of meetings about what needed to happen. I will tell you that the one thing that happened was Amendment 1. Which was huge to neighbors, because the biggest concern was that industrial was going to be allowed to come back in. So the fact that Amendment 1 was made by the P&Z Commission as sort of a stopgap measure to say, regardless of what's going to happen here in the future, a cracked air-like substance cannot come back in a block and a half from your house, was a big deal. But I think we always knew that there was going to have to be a next step, right? That was just to get it out of industrial use. So what this really does with this development is it now completes the northwest quadrant part of the urban plan that could never have been completed in 01. And it takes the zoning to match that to start really moving forward on the next phase of the Lafayette Square urban plan and what can actually be done for the city on Shodo. So that's my read of it. I will tell you there are neighbors in the northwest quadrant that still have concerns. They have concerns about parking, they have concerns about street closures. I'm sure they have some concerns about height. But I think that the bottom line is what this change that we're asking from you allows us to do is to really have that discussion with some certainty that it can move forward. And I have some real sense that these developers are willing to listen to that discussion. And not, Suzanne's right, no one is ever going to all be happy. But I think that what this does for my house, my property values, our streets, given certain, it's a really exciting prospect, I think, on a lot of levels. So I would turn around and say, go for it, because what you're doing is you're opening the gate to an exciting conversation that we haven't been able to have since 2001, let alone 2005. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
All right. We want to thank Julian and Suzanne both for their comments. At this point, can we close the public meeting?
Anybody else that'd like to speak to the public hearing? Sir, would you go up and introduce yourself?
My name is Leonard Adamowski. And I own the south side of the street. And I just wanted to make sure that I understand Bill and feel that partners as we go with development and I'm doing the development on the south side. And when Suzanne came up, I just wanted to take applications to make sure that she mentioned that at the very top of the street, that we keep in that what you have to do to start votes for what was being done on the top part of the street. And I just wanted to make sure that on our side, that wasn't the case. Because we have made clear what we were going to do on this vote. And us following the one side would not work. I just wanted to make sure that I'm clarifying that they might go over that.
And when you're talking about the site for many historians of St. Louis, that's the site where the Edge restaurant was?
Correct.
Okay.
And so I'm clear. I don't know when the Edge restaurant closed, but it's unfamiliar to me.
So it's the one that's shaded as having, that's not within the dash line, but is having the zoning change.
Got it.
Or having the mixed code from mixed to 5-family.
Yeah, so from the very beginning, we said that we would move down, which is what we always say. And everybody was in agreement that that's what we were doing. And just from her coming up here, I wanted to get clarification to make sure that the one's going to hold up to the bonus zone of the neighborhood. As obviously that will be right.
So point of clarity, if I may. So all we're doing is ensuring that residential of a large scale can go on this parcel, 5+. We're not actually changing anything related to historic preservation standards or requirements. So if there's an existing historic requirement there now, it remains despite what we're doing. Sorry.
So a couple things on that you guys had a long road with a number of developers here. And it's been mentioned that some have taken on the bigger sites and have been bigger developers. Some have been smaller developers, and it's all been kind of chaotic for a while with lawyers and others involved. This that's proposed here today is an amendment that I will, correct me if I'm reading this wrong, that everybody in the room has participated in coming up with, including this consortium of developers and you having the site that's the former Edge restaurant site in the use and redevelopment of this area. So I think, is that a common check mark that you're doing that? The second thing that I'm going to ask, therefore, is there seems to be a work in progress about the historic code and the application of the historic code to this area. And I need some verification that that is indeed happening. and sort of a parallel track.
It is on a parallel track. You finish, if you're addressing me.
I'll address the chairman of the committee.
With historical code. We have now completed all of the sections. We are in the process of reviewing them, and we will be taking them to our next LSRC general meeting for review of the LSRC membership, and that is in May. But what basically says in the code, there's just two kinds of development. There's mixed-use development on undeveloped land. And I'm calling that the Frex Arrow T, or the Shoto T that I played. And we have two spaces that are inside of the historical area. And that is the D, Butters property, and other...
Well, the historic district boundaries go all the way to Shoto.
Pardon?
The historic district boundaries go all the way to Shoto.
I'm talking, no, it's, what I misspoke, the historic, contiguous. These two properties, the Dell property on Hickory, which is bounded by historical buildings. That's the one on Hickory that he's going to build, for the Sherwood Forest. That's the one that's already been rezoned. Not part of this zoning that you're doing now, 3 to 4 family. Other one is this property that we found out was being purchased and developed, and that is on the LaSalle inside of the Shoto.
For the interest of time,
Yes.
because we're going to close the public hearing, and then we're going to have a certain amount of time for our discussion tonight, and our discussion might very well get continued to the next meeting. There is a ongoing process in the neighborhood about design and standards for design through the historic district.
Yes.
Yeah, correct. The uses that we're seeing here are in many ways very reflective of the last change from Amendment 1 that allowed these changes in mixed use to be made. There's some tweaking in terms of what height would be allowed and the mixture of uses. But a developer at this point will get to comply with that, and will get to comply with whatever is the historic standards at the time when they come in the door with permits. It is, as I hear, a much work in progress about changing those historic standards, including on all the sites that we're seeing in the footprint here, including the one that's going to C zoning, correct? And the sites that are mixed use. I believe that is what I'm hearing is happening in the neighborhood. I believe the historic preservation staff has been working with you to change those standards, but they're not yet changed. Okay.
Thank you.
Anybody else wish to speak before we close the public hearing? All right. Mr. Chairman, would you close the public hearing?
With that, and hearing no objections, the public hearing is closed. On this item, that moves us to an action item, if I'm not mistaken. Am I correct?
Right. So it moves to an action item. We've concluded the public hearing. Obviously, there's some key players here that we could involve as we take it up as an action item. We're going to lose our quorum in a little bit. So we can begin the discussion. If it needs to be lengthy, we continue it to the next commission meeting. But with that said, just wanted to have that on the table that we've fulfilled our public hearing and advertisement. Now it's a matter of deliberation.
So noted. So, Don, go ahead and take the next item then. What's on the agenda? I hear no discussion at this point.
So the public hearing has been concluded. That means, Mr. Chairman, for we're on agenda item number 4, which is consideration of adoption of amendment number 2.
So we can,
So I just want to make sure I'm clear. to what we're doing, and I did get confused somewhere. Bill made a presentation last planning commission meeting.
Right.
And he made pretty much the same presentation, very short form.
Right.
This time. So, can I ask Bill to come back and ask him some questions? Because,
Tell me where you're going there.
well, I just want to make sure that, it seems like we're doing this because there's a development in progress. And I guess the neighborhood is moving in concert with this development and this whole process.
So good point. So we're not going to stifle Bill. We're not approving their plan tonight.
I understand.
So you're right. So they have been working with the neighborhood using their plan as an illustration and a potential reality for months and months and months about it being a development that incorporates this area north. And then those refinements from that have resulted in these recommendations of these tweaks here for the plan, and then the back too. So the neighborhood leadership and Bill and other part of the development team was welcome to help fill in the understanding, but it's the change we're making is to the neighborhood plan itself.
Right.
Inspired by this new.
But they didn't just make it up in a vacuum. I mean, because one thing that was kind of exciting about what Bill talked about, which was kind of odd in a way, but I mean, I think it's cool too, was a 10-story hotel. And as I think about Lafayette Square and I think about that neighborhood, I thought, well, that's kind of odd, but if the neighborhood is cool with a 10-story hotel, okay. You know, that's cool. And then there's the conversation about historic standards and so on and so forth. So in my mind, I'm trying to process how a 10-story hotel would fit within some kind of historical significant way in that neighborhood. And so then I also hear conversation about Mr. Leonard's project and how it may not necessarily fit the architectural value of the neighborhood. So I'm just a little confused. And I know it's not my neighborhood, but I also want to make sure that everybody's being treated fairly in the whole process. And this is not just designed because of a select group of developers, if you will. Because if Mr. Leonard's project doesn't fit within the scope of everything, then certainly a 10-story hotel doesn't fit within the scope of that particular neighborhood in my mind. And so I want to make sure that we're not doing some type of design type zoning based on
we're doing,
rezoning.
So what complicates this particular neighborhood is if one had to do it again to draw the historic district boundaries, they'd be drawn different. Having a Mack truck dealership, having an industrial gas venue within the historic district, just is fraught with problems. The amendment number 1, which led to the rezoning from it not being industrial to allowing for the mixed use, was an earth-shattering change for this northwest quadrant. This development with these tweaks, or actually without the tweaks, you can put the townhouses in a commercial area. You can put certain types of structures in different zoning categories. There now are some parameters to that, but you can do that. Lafayette Square, you have to comply also with the historic district standards, and they're in the process of revising the historic district standards. So that's yet to come about the design regulations, and it will be a sea change, potentially, of what the designs will be, but that's somewhat on a separate track.
But you don't want me to ask. I really want to ask.
Oh, sure. Go ahead and ask. Yeah, go ahead.
How will Leonard's project impact your project?
definitely be very positive for it. And I also I know the design is progressing quite well, and I think it will fit into the neighborhood for our development, and I think we're going to be able to do it. I talked to your brother. So I think it's going to be very positive.
And then when you talked about the elevation, and it's not on there, but I'm guessing from the top, what's the top, Hickory to Shogo? So in there's some kind of way?
It's a steady
So and you're taking advantage of being able to do 2 stories here, but 3 stories there, but you won't be able to see the difference because of the elevation. Is that right? Did I get that correct? Okay. All right. So what's being proposed today is supportive of what that total vision that you present, both your project and the new development project.
Exactly. So, about since September, whole series of public into the neighborhood is what we want. Yeah, looking at the end of the event story, probably not actually right. But we didn't want to come back later and say, oh, we need to raise it. It's a very difficult site to develop.
So I'm going to ask this key question. Earl's going to take off here for a second. We're going to lose a quorum, so we can either do that in a few come to a conclusion and we'll do it next week. But here's the key question that I have: is the neighborhood has been working jointly with developers, with wishes, with people that might not like Metrolink at the top, might love Metrolink. That whole can of worms. With many developments having come and gone for years. At the moment, you as developers know that one of the things, like we're here in entitlements with getting approval to do something under the zoning, that you will be scrutinized for the historic district standards, and that is, at this point, a speculative thing about whether you can be approved per the standards that are applicable at the moment.
Yes. Okay. Nothing we do here changes that fact.
Nothing we do here changes that. Okay. The difference that we might be a little bit different when we include Mr. Krasnoff, but
it's making.
Yeah. So with that, let me then pass back to collective leadership. And Dan and his staff has been participating in some of the work of the group about revising the standards, historic district standards. There's a general consensus that they're being revised, and there's a general consensus that they would be needed to be revised to get the neighborhood's aspirations in this portion of the quadrant of the neighborhood. Right. But it's still on the to-do list, but close to being there.
Could I make a comment? Assuming the fact that this had to be approved, this development, which we've not seen, by the way, large development, we have not seen it. Rough sketch, and that's all we've seen. We don't know what they're going to come in with Tuesday. We've made comments about the fact that, the problems they have. Let me finish. Our present code, which is in force right now, is very clear when it comes to a multi-residential space there. It's very clear. It says an HME is not required for new non-residential construction due to the greater variety in non-residential buildings within the district and areas within the district where housing is not found. However, new construction of combined commercial and residential property shall use an historic commercial block in the district as an HME. So that's what we're looking for. If something were to happen and we did not see this change, that property would still be based on that section 304.3.
Okay, so I'm going to interject here for just a second.
Sure.
I don't think I've seen anything tonight that's not really just sketches. Some of them may be sketches generated by computers, and some of them may be sketches that are on, more on some tracing paper about this. If that's indeed true, then it's all sort of still subject to review. If there's some additional change or that's about the old Edge restaurant site, I don't think we want to treat that differently than elsewhere. Okay.
I think we're all saying the same thing.
Right.
We're clear that the standards that exist still exist. So.
Right. So with that, I'll leave it to Earl whether he can continue to vote and whether the planning commission is. We're not. The next thing I'll put this up is there is a Chapter 99 in progress. Where is that bill? Progress.
It's on the agenda for the 24th of this month.
Okay. All right. That will come to the planning commission. Generally, Bill, that wouldn't come to the planning commission until the June meeting, and it would be the right place to do this. Are you understanding of that timing? Okay. So with that, Chairman.
Yes.
Chairman, members of the commission, you're free to take a vote tonight.
Yeah.
We will be reviewing the Chapter 99 to the amendment number 2, or we could also do the vote on a second if you'd like. I just leave that as an option.
I'd like to move approval.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded for approval as it stands. Any discussion? Hearing none, call for vote.
Any discussion, folks?
Previous roll.
Hearing previous roll. No
I'm
objections?
going to do a little executive proposal, Jim.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you, Don.
I'm going to do a little executive proposal, Jim.
Should we not do previous roll? Yeah,
I
okay.
checked the previous roll.
Good call.
Dan needs to abstain because he's in the preservation part of the vote. So.
Good call. Roll call.
Okay, David, can you do a roll call, please?
Alderman Boyd. Commissioner Bradley.
Aye.
Commissioner Brown.
Aye.
Commissioner People.
Aye.
Commissioner Krasnov.
Abstain.
Commissioner Boaz. Commissioner, Chair Strother.
Aye.
And the motion passes with 6 ayes and 1 abstention.
Okay. With that action, I need to pass the gavel on to someone in the meeting. Commissioner Brown, can you take it from this point? I need to get into another meeting.
You're welcome to close the meeting, Reverend.
Oh.
Motion to adjourn.
So it's been approved and seconded to close the meeting. This board meeting's closed. Thank you, John.